Hey there, history buffs. Welcome to another exciting journey through time. Today we're diving deep into the complex world of imperialism and colonialism, two forces that have shaped our world in profound ways. These two terms are often used interchangeably, but they have distinct meanings that are important to understand. Understanding these differences is crucial to grasping their profound and lasting impacts on our world. From the way countries interact to the cultural landscapes we see today, the echoes of imperialism and colonialism are everywhere. In the simplest terms, imperialism is like the big idea, the overarching ambition. It's the driving force behind a nation's desire to expand its power and influence. Think of it as a country's relentless pursuit of expanding its power and influence beyond its borders. This can be through military might, economic control, or even cultural dominance. This can be achieved through various means, including military force, economic control, or cultural dominance. Each method leaves its own unique mark on the world. Now, colonialism is the action, the boots on the ground, so to speak. It's the tangible execution of imperial ambitions. It's the actual practice of establishing and maintaining colonies in foreign lands. This involves not just the settlement of people, but also the imposition of the colonizers' rules, laws, and customs. Imagine it as the physical manifestation of imperial ambitions involving the settlement of people and the imposition of the colonizers' rules, laws, and customs. This often leads to significant changes in the social, economic, and cultural fabric of the colonized regions. Think of it this way: imperialism is the desire for the delicious cake, while colonialism is the act of baking and then devouring it, often leaving crumbs and a mess behind. This metaphor highlights the often exploitative nature of colonialism, where resources are extracted and local populations are left to deal with the aftermath. Throughout history, many regions have fought back against colonial rule, leading to movements for independence and self-determination. These struggles have shaped the modern world and continue to influence global politics today. The legacies of imperialism and colonialism are still visible in our world today, from the architecture of our cities to the cultural festivals that celebrate indigenous heritage. Understanding this history helps us appreciate the complexities of our present and the resilience of those who have fought for their freedom. So, as we explore these themes, let's keep in mind the profound impact they have had and continue to have on our world. Stay curious, and let's dive deeper into this fascinating history together. To really understand the nuances of imperialism and colonialism, let's examine two major players in the game: the British and French empires. These two empires, though often seen as similar in their quest for global dominance, had distinct methods and philosophies that shaped their colonies in unique ways. Both were driven by a thirst for power and resources, but their approaches differed in fascinating ways. The Industrial Revolution played a significant role in fueling their ambitions, as both empires sought to exploit the natural resources and labor of their colonies to feed their growing industries back home. The British Empire, often dubbed the empire on which the sun never sets, was all about that global domination. Their vast network of colonies spanned every continent, creating a truly global empire that was unmatched in its reach and influence. From the Americas to Asia, they established vast colonies, often relying on a system of indirect rule. This meant that they would often leave existing local rulers in place, but exert control over them through treaties, alliances, and sometimes coercion. They preferred to exert control through existing local power structures, making alliances and manipulating leaders to maintain order. This approach allowed them to manage their vast empire with relatively few British officials on the ground, relying instead on local intermediaries. The French, on the other hand, adopted a more assimilationist approach in many colonies. They believed in the idea of a civilizing mission, where they sought to transform their colonies into extensions of France itself. They aimed to spread their culture, language, and values, often seeking to integrate colonized populations into French society. This was evident in their establishment of French schools, cultural institutions, and the promotion of the French language in their colonies. Think of their motto, liberté, égalité, fraternité, which, ironically, didn't always extend to their colonial subjects. Despite their lofty ideals, the French often faced resistance and rebellion from those who did not wish to be assimilated into French culture. These contrasting approaches had profound implications for the cultural and political landscapes of the colonized regions. The British legacy often involved a fragmented mosaic of identities, with many former colonies retaining a mix of local and British influences. The British legacy often involved a fragmented mosaic of identities, while the French left a more centralized and culturally homogeneous imprint in many places. In former British colonies, you can see a rich tapestry of cultures and languages, whereas in former French colonies, the French language and cultural practices often remain dominant. Understanding these differences helps us appreciate the complex legacies of colonialism that continue to shape our world today. The British and French empires, though similar in their imperial ambitions, left behind very different worlds in their wake. Their stories remind us of the enduring impact of colonialism on global history and the diverse ways in which it has shaped societies around the world. Let's talk money, shall we? Because economics played a huge role in shaping the impact of imperialism and colonialism. The colonizers were driven by a relentless pursuit of resources and wealth, often viewing their colonies as sources of raw materials and captive markets for their manufactured goods. Imagine a giant conveyor belt. Resources like cotton, rubber and minerals flowed from the colonies to the imperial powers, fueling their industrial revolutions. In turn, manufactured goods were shipped back to the colonies, often undermining local industries and creating dependencies that persisted long after independence. But it wasn't all one-sided exploitation. Colonial powers also built infrastructure like railroads, ports, and communication networks. Now, before we start applauding, it's crucial to remember that these developments primarily served the interests of the colonizers, facilitating the extraction of resources and the control of trade. Section 4. Cultural impacts, from exchange and syncretism to erasure and assimilation. Hold on tight because things are about to get culturally complicated. The encounter between colonizers and colonized populations led to a complex tapestry of cultural exchange, syncretism, erasure and resistance. On the one hand, new ideas, technologies and artistic expressions flowed across borders. Think of the fusion of musical styles or the adoption of Western education systems in some colonies. These interactions weren't always equal, often characterized by power imbalances and the imposition of the colonizers' worldview. On the other hand, colonialism often resulted in the suppression and even eradication of indigenous languages, religions and cultural practices. Colonial authorities sometimes viewed these traditions as backward or uncivilized, seeking to replace them with their own beliefs and values. This cultural clash led to resistance movements that sought to preserve and revive indigenous cultures, laying the groundwork for post-colonial identity politics. Section 5. Political impacts, shifting sands of power and the legacy of artificial borders. Now let's talk politics. The political landscape of our world has been profoundly influenced by historical events, and few have had as lasting an impact as colonialism. Colonialism dramatically reshaped the political map of the world, often with lasting and devastating consequences. The borders drawn by colonial powers were often arbitrary, ignoring the complex tapestry of ethnic, linguistic and cultural identities that existed long before their arrival. European powers carved up continents like Africa, drawing arbitrary borders that paid little heed to existing ethnic, linguistic or cultural boundaries. These lines on a map were more about the convenience and interests of the colonizers than the realities on the ground. This division sowed the seeds of future conflicts and instability. When independence movements eventually succeeded, the newly formed nations were left to grapple with these artificial borders, often leading to internal strife and external conflicts. Imagine trying to build a nation from scratch, with different groups forced together, each with its own history, language and aspirations. The challenge of nation building in such a context is immense, requiring not just political will but also a deep understanding of the diverse communities within the borders. It's a recipe for tension and strife, and sadly we still see the repercussions of these artificial divisions in many parts of the world today. Modern-day protests, border tensions and ethnic conflicts can often trace their roots back to these colonial-era decisions. Colonialism also disrupted traditional power structures, replacing them with systems modelled after European institutions. These new systems were often alien to the local populations and did not always align with their existing governance structures. While this sometimes led to the introduction of democratic ideals, it often resulted in the concentration of power in the hands of a small, Western-educated elite. This elite was frequently more aligned with the interests of the colonial powers than with those of the local population. Stay tuned because in the next section we'll explore how these legacies continue to shape the world today through a post-colonial lens. We'll delve into the ongoing struggles for identity, governance and unity in regions still grappling with the shadows of their colonial past. The story of these artificial borders is far from over, and understanding it is key to addressing many of the political challenges we face today.